I jolted awake at 3:00 am. The spot beside me was empty and cold. Through the window, I saw my husband quietly drive off in his truck. I followed him all the way to a deserted lakeshore, then froze as I watched him drag a heavy sack and dump it into the dark water. When the rescue team pulled it back up and tore the rough fabric open, my heart nearly stopped. What I saw inside made my whole body tremble. The man who'd been lying next to me for the past 5 years had been hiding something unforgivable in that sack. Thank you so much for being here. Your presence keeps this channel alive. I'd love to hear from you. What city and country are you watching from? Share in the comments so we can build this community together. Please keep in mind this story blends fictional details for entertainment and educational purposes. Any resemblance to particular names or places is coincidental. That said, the core message I'm offering here is something I hope will inspire and guide you. 5 years. That's how long I thought I had it all figured out. My name is Hannah Preston, and for half a decade I believed I was living the American dream in Kalispell, Montana, a small city cradled between the Flathead Valley and the stunning Rocky Mountains. My husband Jason was everything a woman could ask for on paper. A successful real estate manager. Charming smile. Strong shoulders that seemed built to carry the weight of the world. Our neighbors, the Hendersons, always said we were the perfect couple at every summer barbecue. I used to smile at that compliment. Now I wonder if I was just too blind to see the cracks forming beneath the surface. It started 3 months ago. Subtle changes I tried to convince myself were nothing. Jason became distant, his warm brown eyes turning cold whenever I asked about his day. He'd snap at me over trivial things. Dishes left in the sink. My car parked too close to his precious pickup truck. He started coming home late, always with excuses about difficult clients or property showings that ran long. His phone, which used to sit carelessly on the kitchen counter, was now glued to his hand. Screen down. Passcode changed. And then there was the perfume. Not mine. A sweet floral scent that clung to his shirts when I did the laundry. So faint I thought maybe I was imagining it. I told myself I was being paranoid that 8 years together. 3 dating. 5 married meant I should trust him. I buried my doubts beneath forced smiles and silent prayers that whatever storm was brewing would pass. But on the night of September 15th, 2023, everything I thought I knew came crashing down. It was just past 9 o'clock when my phone rang. The screen lit up with Dad glowing in the darkness of our living room. Jason was supposedly at a late meeting again. I answered on the second ring. Hannah. My father's voice was barely above a whisper, tight with something I'd never heard from him before or fear. Thomas Grant. My 60-year-old father was a retired carpenter. A man who'd built half the decks in Kalispell with his own hands. Who'd taught me how to fix a leaking faucet when I was 10. Who never raised his voice even when I wrecked his truck at 16. Hearing him sound like this sent ice through my veins. Dad. What's wrong? I need to see you tonight. Right now if you can. His words came fast. Urgent. It's important. Sweetheart. Very important. But don't. He paused and I heard him take a shaky breath. Don't tell Jason. Please. My stomach dropped. Dad. You're scaring me. What's going on? Not over the phone. Just come to the house. I'll explain everything when you get here. There was a shuffling sound in the background like he was moving around quickly. Hannah. I love you. Remember that. Before I could respond, the line went dead. I stared at my phone. My hands starting to tremble. My father had never spoken to me like that. Never told me to hide something from Jason. Never sounded so desperate. I grabbed my coat and keys without thinking. Scribbling a quick note for Jason. Dad called. Going to check on him. Be back soon. The drive to my father's house normally took 20 minutes. But that night it felt like hours. Kalispell was quiet under a pale September moon. The streets lined with golden larches and evergreens that cast long shadows across the pavement. I passed the Safeway where Dad and I used to buy groceries every Sunday. The old courthouse downtown. The turnoff to Flathead Lake where he'd taught me to fish. My mind raced with possibilities. Was he sick? Had something happened? Why couldn't he tell Jason? My father's house sat at the end of a gravel driveway on the outskirts of town. A modest 2-bedroom cabin he'd built himself 30 years ago. As my headlights swept across the property, my breath caught in my throat. The front door was wide open, swinging slightly in the autumn breeze. Every light in the house was off. I pulled up slowly, gravel crunching under my tires, and killed the engine. The silence that followed was deafening. No crickets. No wind through the pines. Just an eerie, suffocating quiet. I tried calling my father's cell phone. It rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. "Dad," I called out, stepping onto the porch. My voice sounded small, swallowed by the darkness. "Dad, are you here?" Nothing. I pushed the door open wider and fumbled for the light switch. When the overhead bulb flickered on, my blood turned to ice. The living room was in chaos. My father's favorite recliner, the one he'd sat in every evening to watch the news, was knocked on its side. The coffee table was askew, magazines scattered across the hardwood floor, and there, near the overturned chair, were small dark spots that made my stomach lurch. Blood. Not much. Just a few drops like someone had been hit and bled before being dragged away. I forced myself to move deeper into the house, my legs shaking so badly I had to grip the doorframe for support. The kitchen was untouched, the bedroom empty. But when I reached the back door, I saw it. My father's wristwatch. The silver Timex I'd given him for his 60th birthday, lying in the dirt just outside the threshold. He never took that watch off. Never. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering against my ribs. Someone had been here. Someone had hurt my father. Someone had taken him. My hands shook so violently I could barely hold my phone as I dialed 911. 911. "What's your emergency?" The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional. "My father." I choked on the words, tears burning my eyes. "My father is missing. I came to his house and there's blood." The door was open. His watch is on the ground. Something's wrong. Something's really wrong. I need you to stay calm. What's the address?" I rattled off the address, my voice cracking with every syllable. The dispatcher assured me officers were on their way, told me not to touch anything, told me to wait outside. But I couldn't move. I stood in that doorway staring at my father's watch glinting in the porch light, and one thought pounded through my skull like a drumbeat. Where is my father? And who did this to him? The blue and red lights arrived within minutes, painting my father's quiet neighborhood in flashes of urgency. I stood on the porch, hugging myself against the cold September night, watching as uniformed officers moved through the house with flashlights and cameras. Everything felt surreal, like I was watching a crime show on television. Except this wasn't fiction. This was my father's blood on the floor. This was his watch in the dirt. A woman in a dark blazer approached me, her stride confident despite the late hour. She looked to be in her early 40s with sharp green eyes and auburn hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail. "Mrs. Preston. I'm Detective Sarah Mitchell. Lake County Sheriff's Office." She extended her hand, her grip firm and reassuring. "I've been with the department for 15 years. I'm going to do everything I can to find your father." I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. Detective Mitchell led me to one of the patrol cars and took my statement, her pen moving steadily across a small notepad as I recounted everything. The phone call. My father's frightened voice. the chaos inside the house. She listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding, her expression carefully neutral. "Did your father mention any conflicts recently?" she asked. "Anyone who might want to hurt him? Old disputes? Money? Troubles? Anything unusual?" I shook my head, my throat tight. "No. Dad's lived here for 30 years. Everyone knows him. He built half the decks in town. He doesn't have enemies." "What about his personal life? Any recent changes? New relationships?" "He's been alone since Mom died 8 years ago. He's just Dad. He fixes things. He fishes. He watches Jeopardy every night at 7:00. My voice cracked. "He's not the kind of person who disappears." "Ooh." Detective Mitchell's eyes softened slightly. "We're going to process the scene. Put out a bolo. Be on the lookout for your father and his vehicle. Does he drive a blue Ford F-150 2015? The details tumbled out automatically. License plate MT47826. She wrote it down. "Good. We'll get that out immediately." She paused, studying my face. "Mrs. Preston, I know this is terrifying, but you need to go home and try to rest. We'll be working through the night. If anything changes, I'll call you immediately. You have my word." Rest. The word felt absurd. But she was right. I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. And the officers needed to work without me hovering. I nodded numbly and drove home through empty streets, my mind spinning with horrible possibilities. When I pulled into our driveway at 11:00, Jason's truck was parked in its usual spot. The house was dark except for the porch light I'd left on. I found the note I'd written earlier still on the kitchen counter untouched. Either Jason hadn't come home yet or he'd come in through the garage without checking for messages. I climbed the stairs as quietly as I could. Our bedroom door was ajar, and in the dim glow from the hallway nightlight, I could see Jason's form under the blankets, his breathing deep and even. Asleep, or at least pretending to be. I didn't wake him. I didn't tell him what had happened. My father's warning echoed in my head. "Don't tell Jason. Please." Instead, I changed into sweatpants and a t-shirt, then lay down on top of the covers staring at the ceiling. Every creak of the house made me jump. Every car passing outside sent my heart racing. I kept seeing my father's overturned chair. The drops of blood. His watch lying in the dirt like a discarded thought. Sleep should have been impossible. But exhaustion is a strange thing. It pulls you under even when your mind is screaming. Sometime after midnight, I drifted off into a restless nightmare-filled doze. I woke to the sound of an engine starting. My eyes snapped open disoriented. The red numbers on the alarm clock read 3:04 a.m. Beside me, Jason's side of the bed was empty, the sheets thrown back. I sat up, my pulse quickening, and heard the unmistakable rumble of his pickup truck in the driveway below. I scrambled to the window and peered through the blinds just in time to see Jason's truck pulling out onto the street. Headlights cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. Where was he going at 3 o'clock in the morning? Jason never went out at night. Never. He was obsessive about his sleep schedule. Always in bed by 10:00. Always up at 6:30. And yet there he was driving away from our house in the middle of the night less than 6 hours after my father had vanished. "Don't tell Jason." My father's voice. That fear in his tone. Before I could second-guess myself, I grabbed my keys and coat and ran downstairs. My hands were shaking as I started my car, keeping the headlights off until I was out of the driveway. I followed at a distance, staying far enough back that he wouldn't notice. Close enough that I wouldn't lose him. Jason drove south away from town toward Flathead Lake. The roads were empty at this hour. Just me and him and the occasional deer crossing through the headlight beams. The mountains loomed black against a sky full of stars, and a thin crescent moon hung low on the horizon, offering barely enough light to see by. He turned onto a dirt access road that led down to the lake, a remote spot where locals sometimes launched fishing boats in the summer. I killed my engine and coasted to a stop about 200 yards back, hidden behind a cluster of pine trees. My breath fogged the windshield as I watched. Jason parked near the water's edge and got out. For a moment, he just stood there looking around as if checking to make sure he was alone. Then he walked to the back of his truck and dropped the tailgate. What happened next made my blood turn ice. He reached into the truck bed and pulled out a large burlap sack, the kind used for landscaping or construction debris. It was bulky, awkward, and clearly heavy. He had to use both hands to drag it to the edge of the tailgate, grunting with effort. Even from where I sat, even in the pale, inadequate moonlight, I could see the shape. Long, thick in the middle, narrower at the ends. The shape of a person. Oh God. Oh God. No. Jason hoisted the sack, dragged it really to the rocky shore. Then with one hard shove, he pushed it into the water. It hit with a dull splash and immediately began to sink, pulled down by whatever weight was inside. Within seconds, it disappeared beneath the dark surface of Flathead Lake. Jason stood there for a moment, breathing hard, staring at the water. Then he wiped his hands on his jeans, climbed back into his truck, and drove away. I sat frozen, my mind refusing to process what I'd just witnessed. My husband. The man I'd shared a bed with for 5 years. The man who kissed me goodbye every morning had just thrown something into the lake. Something that looked like a body. Something that could be my father. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold my phone. I waited until Jason's tail lights disappeared around the bend. Then I dialed 911 for the second time that night. 911. What's your emergency? My husband. The words came out strangled. Barely human. My husband just threw something into Flathead Lake. A big sack. I think I choked on a sob. I think it might be my father. Oh God. I think he killed my father. By the time the first responders arrived at Flathead Lake, the eastern sky was beginning to lighten. Not quite sunrise, but that pale, ghostly pre-dawn glow that turns everything gray. I stood shivering on the rocky shore, wrapped in a scratchy wool blanket. One of the deputies had draped over my shoulders, watching as the Lake County Sheriff's dive team unloaded equipment from their van. Detective Sarah Mitchell was already there, moving between officers with purposeful efficiency. When she saw me, she walked over, her expression grim. Show me exactly where he threw it in. I pointed with a trembling hand to the spot about 30 yards offshore, marked now by a floating buoy one of the divers had tossed out. Right there. He dragged the sack to the edge and just pushed it in. It sank so fast. Sarah nodded and turned to the dive team leader, a stocky man in his 50s with a weathered face. Water temp. 48 degrees. He replied, pulling on a wetsuit. Visibility's maybe 10 feet with lights. If there's someone in that sack, hypothermia will have set in fast. But the cold water also slows everything down. There's a chance. A chance. That single word kept me breathing. 3 divers entered the water at 4:47 am. I watched their lights disappear beneath the surface, leaving only ripples expanding outward in the darkness. Minutes crawled by. 10. 20. 30. I couldn't feel my fingers anymore. Couldn't feel my feet. All I could do was stare at that black water and pray. At 5:38 am. Just as the sun crested the mountains and painted the lake gold, one of the divers surfaced, shouting and waving. Within seconds, the other 2 emerged, hauling something between them. A sodden, mud-stained burlap sack, water streaming from its seams. They dragged it onto the shore and 2 EMTs rushed forward with a medical kit. One of them produced a knife and slit the sack open. What I saw inside stopped my heart. A man. Pale. motionless. His clothes soaked through. His skin tinged blue-gray. Bruises covered his face and arms. Dark purple welts that looked like they'd been made with fists or something worse. His lips were a horrible shade of violet. But it was his watch. The silver Timex on his left wrist. That made me scream. Dad. I tried to run forward. But Sarah caught me holding me back as the EMTs swarmed over my father's body. One of them pressed 2 fingers to his neck, then looked up sharply. I've got a pulse. Weak and thready. But it's there. Get the AEDs ready. They worked with terrifying speed, ripping open his shirt. Attaching electrode pads. Tilting his head back to clear his airway. Water poured from his mouth as they turned him on his side. One EMT started chest compressions while another fitted an oxygen mask over his face. Come on. Thomas. The lead EMT muttered, pumping rhythmically. Stay with us. Come on. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My father. My strong, steady father who'd taught me to tie my shoes and drive a stick shift, was lying on the ground like a broken doll, and I couldn't do anything but watch. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 2 minutes, my father coughed a wet rattling sound and his eyes fluttered open for just a second before closing again. His breathing. The EMT shouted. Let's move. We need life flight here now. Within minutes, a medical helicopter thundered overhead, landing in a clearing 50 yards away. They loaded my father onto a stretcher and ran. I barely remember climbing into Detective Mitchell's patrol car. Barely remember the frantic drive to Providence St. Joseph Medical Center in Polson, where the helicopter had already arrived. All I remember is the blood roaring in my ears and one thought over and his alive. Dr. Michael Ross. Medicine, the trauma bay. A tall, lean man in his 50s with silver hair and steady hands. Are you his daughter? He asked. His voice calm despite the chaos around us. Yes. Is he? Will he? Your father has severe head trauma. Multiple contusions. And water in his lungs. We're taking him into surgery immediately to relieve pressure on his brain. The next few hours are critical. He paused. His brown eyes kind but unflinching. You got him here just in time. 15. Maybe 20 minutes later and we wouldn't be having this conversation. They wheeled him away and I collapsed into a plastic chair in the waiting room. My body finally giving out. Sarah sat beside me silent for a long moment. Then, Hannah, I need to ask you something. I looked at her exhausted. Are you absolutely certain it was Jason you saw at the lake? The question hit me like a slap. Yes, it was him. His truck. His jacket. His in the dark. Sarah interrupted gently. From 200 yards away. No video. No photographs. A defense attorney will tear that apart in court. They'll say you were in shock that you couldn't possibly identify someone in those conditions. She leaned forward. I believe you. But belief isn't enough. We need hard evidence. My father. When he wakes up. He'll tell you if he wakes up. Sarah said quietly. And if he remembers. The words hung between us like a guillotine blade. 3 hours later. Dr. Ross emerged from surgery pulling off his gloves. I shot to my feet. He made it through. Dr. Ross said. And I nearly collapsed with relief. The surgery was successful. We've stabilized the bleeding and reduced the swelling. But he hesitated. Mrs. Preston, your father suffered a significant traumatic brain injury. It's very likely he'll experience retrograde amnesia, memory loss surrounding the event. He may not remember who attacked him. He may not remember the attack at all. I stared at him. The relief curdling into something cold and bitter. My father was alive. But the one person who could identify his attacker might not remember a thing. And Jason somewhere out there was still free. I didn't remember driving home from the hospital. One moment. I was watching my father's pale face disappear behind the surgical ward doors. And the next, I was sitting in my driveway, engine idling, staring at the house I'd shared with Jason for 5 years. The house that suddenly felt like a crime scene. It was nearly 10 o'clock in the morning on September 16th when I finally dragged myself inside. The note I'd scribbled the night before still sat on the kitchen counter. Dad called, going to check on him. Be back soon. Such innocent words. I'd had no idea then that within hours I'd be watching my husband dump my father into a lake. I couldn't bring myself to go upstairs to our bedroom. Instead, I collapsed on the living room couch, still wearing yesterday's clothes, and closed my eyes. Sleep came in jagged fragments full of dark water and burlap sacks and my father's blue lips. The pounding on the door woke me 3 hours later. I stumbled to answer it disoriented and found Detective Sarah Mitchell flanked by 2 uniformed officers. Behind them, a patrol car sat in the driveway, lights flashing. "Hannah," Sarah said, her voice tight. "Is Jason here?" "No. I haven't seen him since I stopped the memory flooding back. Since I followed him to the lake. We have a warrant for his arrest. Attempted murder, assault with intent to kill." She held up the document. "We need to search the premises." I stepped aside, numb. "Search whatever you want. He's not here." They moved through the house with methodical efficiency. Upstairs. Downstairs. Garage. Basement. 15 minutes later, Sarah returned to the living room. Her jaw set. "His truck's gone. Clothes missing from the closet. Looks like he packed in a hurry and ran." "How long ago?" I asked. "Hard to say. Could have been right after he got back from the lake or later this morning." She studied me. "When's the last time you actually saw him in this house?" I thought back. "Last night around 11:00. He was in bed asleep or pretending to be. I didn't wake him. Then at 3:00 a.m. I heard his truck start. I followed him to the lake and after that I shook my head. I went straight to the hospital. I haven't been home until just now." Sarah nodded slowly. "So, he could have come back here, grabbed his things, and disappeared hours ago. We've issued a bolo for his vehicle. But Montana is a big state with a lot of backroads. If he's smart, he's already across the border into Canada or Idaho." The reality of it hit me like a punch to the gut. Jason was gone. My father's attacker was out there somewhere free while Dad lay unconscious in a hospital bed. What about the evidence at my father's house? I asked desperately. Fingerprints. DNA. Something. Sarah's expression turned grim. "That's the problem. Come with me. I need to show you something." 20 minutes later, we stood in my father's living room, now cordoned off with yellow crime scene tape. A forensics technician was packing up equipment and Sarah led me to a spot near the overturned chair where I'd seen blood 2 nights ago. "We found clear fingerprints here. Here. And on the back door handle," Sarah explained, pointing. "We also found footprints in the dirt outside. Size 11 distinctive tread pattern. But here's the issue." She pulled out her phone and showed me a photograph of a fingerprint analysis. "These prints don't match Jason." I stared at her. "What?" "The fingerprints belong to someone else. A man, based on the size and ridge patterns. But not your husband. Same with the boot prints. We checked Jason's shoes from your house. Different size. Different tread. That's impossible. I saw him. You saw someone throw a sack into the lake." Sarah interrupted gently. "In the dark from 200 yards away after a traumatic night." "Hannah, I believe you. But a defense attorney will destroy this in court. They'll argue you were in shock. That visibility was poor. That you wanted to believe it was Jason because of the tension in your marriage. But the truck. It was his truck. A Ford F-150. One of the most common vehicles in Montana." Sarah's voice was firm, but not unkind. "Without a clear photograph, Without your father's testimony. Without physical evidence placing Jason at the scene of the attack. All we have is circumstantial. And these fingerprints. They point to someone else being involved. I felt the ground shifting under me. You're saying there was an accomplice? Or Jason hired someone to do the actual attack while he handled disposal? Sarah crossed her arms. Either way, we need more. We need motive. We need connection. We need something concrete that ties Jason to this crime. Motive. The word echoed in my head as we drove back to my house. What reason would Jason have to want my father dead? Money. My father wasn't wealthy. Just a retired carpenter with a modest savings account. A grudge. They'd always gotten along fine. Or so I'd thought. Unless there was something I didn't know. Something Jason had been hiding. I spent the rest of that day and all of September 17th searching. I went through Jason's home office. His dresser drawers. The pockets of jackets hanging in our closet. I felt like a stranger in my own house discovering that I'd been living with a man I didn't really know at all. It was late afternoon on the 17th when I found the box. It was shoved far back in the bottom drawer of Jason's nightstand beneath a tangle of old charging cables and expired warranties. A plain wooden cigar box. The kind you can buy at any craft store. My hands shook as I lifted the lid. Inside were letters. At least a dozen of them written on pale pink stationery in looping feminine handwriting. And photographs. Printed photos. Not digital. Of Jason with a woman I'd never seen before. She was younger than me. Maybe 28 with long blonde hair and a bright smile. In one photo. She was kissing Jason's cheek. In another. They were holding hands at some restaurant I didn't recognize. I felt sick. But I forced myself to read the letters. Most were sweet. Mundane. The kinds of things lovers write to each other. I miss you. Last night was amazing. I can't wait to see you again. They were dated over the past 8 months. Signed Amy Parker in that same flowing script. But it was the last letter dated August 25th, 2023 that made my world stop. Jason. I don't know how to say this except to just say it. I'm pregnant. The test was positive this morning. I know we talked about being careful. But I guess it wasn't enough. I can't do this alone. I work part-time at a dentist's office. I barely make rent as it is. My family disowned me years ago. I don't have anyone. I need to know what you want to do. If you want to be involved. If you'll help me. If I don't even know what I'm asking. I'm scared. Jason. I'm so scared. I can't raise a baby by myself. I just can't. Please call me. We need to talk. Amy. I read the letter 3 times. Each word burning itself into my brain. Jason had gotten another woman pregnant. That's why he'd been distant. Distracted. Angry. That's why he'd been coming home late. Why his phone was always locked. But what did this have to do with my father? Unless my father had found out. Unless Dad had discovered the affair. Confronted Jason. Threatened to tell me. And Jason, desperate to keep his secret, had decided to silence him permanently. I grabbed the box and drove straight to the sheriff's office. Sarah looked up when I burst into her office and I dropped the box on her desk with a thud. My husband was having an affair. I said. My voice shaking. With a woman named Amy Parker. And she was pregnant. Is that motive enough? For 2 days I lived in that hospital waiting room. I slept in hard plastic chairs. Ate stale vending machine sandwiches. And watched the clock on the wall tick forward with agonizing slowness. Detective Sarah came and went updating me on the search for Jason. Still no sign of him. His truck. Or any trail leading out of Montana. It was as if he'd vanished into thin air. But all I could think about was my father lying in the ICU with tubes and wires snaking from his body. A ventilator breathing for him while his brain tried to heal itself from the trauma. On the morning of September 18th, Dr. Ross found me pacing the hallway outside the ICU. "Mrs. Preston," he said, and something in his voice made my heart leap. "Your father's awake." I ran. He was propped up slightly in the hospital bed. His head wrapped in white bandages. His face pale and gaunt. But his eyes were open. Those familiar hazel eyes that had watched me grow up. That had crinkled with laughter at my terrible jokes. That had shed tears at my wedding. Seeing them open again felt like a miracle. "Dad," I choked out. Rushing to his side, I grabbed his hand, carefully mindful of the 4-line taped to his skin. "Dad. Oh my God. You're awake." His fingers tightened weakly around mine. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. "Hannah. Baby girl." Tears streamed down my face. "I'm here. I'm right here. You're going to be okay." But then I saw the confusion in his eyes. The way his brow furrowed as he looked around the room. Where am I?" "Providence St. Joseph Medical Center. You've been here for 2 days. You had surgery." I swallowed hard. "Dad, do you remember what happened?" He closed his eyes. And for a long moment, I thought he'd fallen asleep again. But then he spoke. His voice thick with frustration and something that sounded like fear. I was home. It was night. I heard something outside in the backyard. A noise like someone was. He trailed off, his face contorting with effort. I went to check. And then darkness. Everything just went black. "Do you remember who it was? Did you see anyone?" "No." The word came out like a sob. "I don't remember. Hannah. I don't remember anything after hearing that noise. Who did this to me? Why can't I remember?" Dr. Ross stepped forward. Then his expression sympathetic. "Mr. Grant, what you're experiencing is called retrograde amnesia. It's very common after traumatic brain injuries. The brain essentially protects itself by blocking out the trauma. Sometimes those memories come back in a few weeks, a few months. Sometimes they don't come back at all." My father's hand went limp in mine. "So I might never remember." "It's possible," Dr. Ross admitted. "But you're alive, sir. That's what matters. You're going to recover." I wanted to believe that was enough. But as I looked at my father's anguished face, I knew the truth without his testimony. Without him being able to identify his attacker, Jason had a chance of walking free. Detective Sarah arrived an hour later with a notepad and a tape recorder. She was gentle with my father, asking him to recount everything he could remember about that night. But his story was the same. He heard a noise, went to investigate, and then nothing. No face, no voice, no clear memory of the attack itself. Sarah's disappointment was palpable. After she turned off the recorder, she pulled me aside into the hallway. "Without his testimony, this case just got a lot harder," she said bluntly. "We have circumstantial evidence. Your eyewitness account, the affair, the letters. But a good defense attorney will argue reasonable doubt. And juries don't like convicting without solid proof." "What about Amy Parker?" I asked. "Have you found her? If we can prove Jason got her pregnant, if she'll testify." Sarah's expression stopped me cold. "Hannah, I was going to tell you this later. But you should know now. Amy Parker is dead." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "She died in a car accident on September 1st, 2 weeks ago." Sarah pulled out her phone and showed me an official-looking document. A Montana Highway Patrol accident report. Her vehicle left the road on Highway 93 north of Whitefish and rolled down a cliff. She was pronounced dead at the scene. I stared at the report, my mind reeling. September 1st. That was 2 weeks before my father was attacked. 2 weeks before Jason tried to kill him. Do you think the accident was investigated thoroughly? Sarah interrupted. No signs of foul play. No evidence of brake tampering. No other vehicles involved. Her car hit a patch of black ice. It was an unusually cold night for late summer. The medical examiner ruled it accidental death. There's nothing to suggest Jason was involved. I couldn't process it. Amy was dead. The woman who'd been carrying Jason's child. The woman whose letters proved his affair was gone. But the baby. She said in her letter she was pregnant. What happened to the baby? Sarah's jaw tightened. That's what I'm trying to figure out. According to Amy's employment records, she'd taken medical leave starting in late August. Her landlord said she'd been home a lot, keeping to herself. But after she died, there was no mention of a child in any of the reports. No baby found at her apartment. No hospital records of a recent birth in the area. So either she wasn't pregnant anymore or the baby is somewhere else. Sarah met my eyes. Hannah. If Jason knew Amy was pregnant, if he was involved somehow, that child could be evidence. We need to find out what happened. I thought about the last letter dated August 25th. I can't raise a baby by myself. Had she already by then? Had she given the baby to Jason or to someone else? A horrible thought crept into my mind. What if Jason had taken the baby and done something to it? What if there was a tiny, innocent victim in all of this that we didn't even know about yet? I'll keep digging into Amy's last days. Sarah promised. In the meantime, you stay with your father. Help him recover. And if he remembers anything at all, call me immediately. After she left, I returned to my father's room. He was asleep again. His breathing steady. The monitors beeping their rhythmic reassurance. I sank into the chair beside his bed and closed my eyes. My father couldn't remember. Amy was dead. Jason was in the wind. And somewhere out there possibly was a baby who had no idea their life had begun in the middle of a nightmare. I made myself a promise then, if my father couldn't find justice through his memories, I would find it another way. I would dig until I uncovered every secret Jason had buried. I would find the truth no matter how deep I had to go. If you can't remember, Dad, I whispered, I'll remember for you. The afternoon sun was slanting through the hospital windows when I finally forced myself to leave my father's side. He'd fallen asleep again, exhausted from the effort of staying awake and trying to remember. And the nurses assured me he'd rest for hours. I needed to go home, grab some clean clothes for him, maybe shower and change myself. I'd been wearing the same jeans and sweater for 2 days straight. The drive back to my house felt strange, surreal. Everything looked exactly the same. The neighbors' lawns, the mailbox at the end of the driveway, the faded welcome mat on the porch. But nothing would ever be the same again. My husband was a fugitive. My father was in the hospital with a fractured skull and no memory of who tried to kill him. And somewhere out there was a dead woman's baby. A child who might be the key to everything. I pulled into the driveway and killed the engine. Then sat for a moment, gathering my courage to go inside. The house felt haunted now, full of Jason's lies. But as I approached the front door, I saw her. A woman stood on my porch, clutching a crying baby against her chest. She was middle-aged, maybe 45, with dark hair pulled back in a bun, and worry lines etched deep around her eyes. Latina by her features, dressed in jeans and a worn cardigan despite the mild September weather. The baby in her arms was wailing. A thin, desperate sound that made my chest tighten. "Excuse me," I said carefully, my hand instinctively moving toward my phone. "Can I help you?" The woman's head snapped up, and I saw fear flash across her face. Her eyes were red-rimmed, like she'd been crying. "You are Mrs. Preston. Hannah Preston." My stomach dropped. "Yes. Who are you?" My name is Maria. Her voice was heavily accented. Trembling. I am so sorry. I am so sorry. But I cannot keep this baby anymore. I am scared. The baby's cries grew louder. More frantic. I could see now that it was tiny. Newborn tiny. With a scrunched up red face and flailing fists. I don't understand. I said. Stepping closer. Whose baby is that? Your husband. Jason. Maria's hands shook as she tried to soothe the crying infant. He came to me 3 days ago. He said he needed someone to watch his baby just for a few days while he took care of some business. He paid me $500 cash. I did not ask questions. Her voice broke. But then I saw the news. They say he is wanted for attempted murder. They say he tried to kill someone. I cannot be involved in this. I have my own family. I cannot go to jail. The world tilted sideways. Jason had a baby. Jason had brought a baby to this woman 3 days ago. The same night he tried to drown my father. Where did he get the baby? I asked. My voice barely steady. I don't know. He just showed up at my door with the diaper bag and said it was his son. That the mother could not take care of him. He said he would come back in a few days. Maria's eyes filled with tears. But he did not come back. And now I see his picture on TV. And I am frightened. I am so frightened. The baby was screaming now. His cries piercing the afternoon air. Maria thrust him toward me along with a battered diaper bag. Please. You are his wife. You must take him. I cannot keep him. I have to go. Wait. I reached out instinctively, taking the baby even as my mind reeled. He was so light. So fragile. Maria. Wait. I need your contact information. The police will want to talk to you. But she was already backing away, shaking her head violently. No. No police. I am sorry. I am so sorry. And then she turned and ran. Literally ran down my driveway to a beat-up sedan parked on the street. Within seconds. She was gone. I stood on my porch holding a screaming baby. My heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. This was Jason's son. This had to be Amy Parker's baby. The child she'd written about in her letter. The child she'd said she couldn't raise alone. But Amy was dead and Jason had taken their son and dumped him with a stranger, then vanished. The baby's cries pulled me back to the present. He was hungry, I could tell by the desperate rhythmic quality of his wails. I fumbled with the diaper bag. Found a bottle of formula and carried him inside. My hands shook as I warmed the bottle under hot tap water, then sat down on the couch and offered it to him. He latched on immediately, his tiny hands gripping the bottle, his cries subsiding into gulping sounds. As he drank, I got my first real look at him. He couldn't have been more than 2 or 3 weeks old, with a dusting of dark hair and skin still blotchy and new. He was beautiful. And he was evidence. I called 911 for what felt like the 100th time in 3 days. I need to report an abandoned child. I told the dispatcher, my voice surprisingly calm considering the baby in my arms and the chaos in my head. An hour later, I was back at the hospital, this time in the pediatric wing. A kind-faced nurse named Linda Patterson, who looked to be in her early 60s with silver-streaked hair and gentle hands, examined the baby while I explained what had happened. He's about 2 weeks old. Maybe a bit older. Nurse Patterson said, checking his reflexes and measuring his length. Healthy weight. No signs of abuse or neglect. Whoever was caring for him did a decent job. She wrapped him in a clean blanket and handed him back to me. But he'll need to stay here for observation just to be safe and will need to notify Child Protective Services. Detective Sarah arrived shortly after, her expression grim. She listened to my account of Maria. The diaper bag. Jason's instructions from 3 days ago. We'll try to track down this Maria, Sarah said, making notes. But if she's undocumented, she's probably long gone. People get scared when they see murder warrants on TV. She looked at the sleeping baby in the hospital bassinet. We'll run a DNA test. Compare his profile to samples we took from your house. If this is Jason's biological child, it confirms the affair and it gives us more motive. I stared down at the tiny sleeping face. 2 weeks old. Born right around the time Amy Parker died in that car accident. Was it possible she'd given birth, handed the baby to Jason and then driven off that cliff? Or had something more sinister happened? Do you think Jason killed her? I whispered. Sarah's jaw tightened. I don't know yet, but we're going to find out. As I watched the baby sleep, a single thought echoed through my mind. Is this my husband's son? Is this Amy's child? And what kind of monster abandons his own baby to cover up a crime? A week passed in a blur of sleepless nights and bottle feedings. The baby. This tiny innocent stranger who'd been thrust into my arms by a terrified woman, stayed with me under temporary emergency foster care while the state sorted through the legal mess. I'd converted Jason's home office into a makeshift nursery, unable to bear the thought of putting the baby in our bedroom. The room I'd shared with the man who'd abandoned him. I named him Noah. It felt right somehow. A name that meant rest or comfort. Though neither of us were getting much of either. Noah was a good baby, all things considered. He ate well, slept in fits and starts, and had these dark blue eyes that seemed to look right through me, searching for answers I didn't have. On the morning of September 25 Detective Sarah called. Hannah. The DNA results are in. Can you come to my office? My heart dropped into my stomach. I bundled Noah into his car seat. Maria's battered diaper bag had included one. Thank God. And drove to the Lake County Sheriff's Office with my hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. Sarah's office was a small cramped space that smelled like burnt coffee and old paperwork. She gestured for me to sit and I did, settling Noah's carrier on the chair beside me. He was asleep. His tiny chest rising and falling peacefully, oblivious to the bomb about to drop. I'll cut to the chase, Sarah said, sliding a manila folder across the desk. We ran Noah's DNA against samples from your house. Jason's toothbrush. His hairbrush. Some clothing. The lab results came back this morning. I opened the folder with shaking hands. The document inside was full of scientific terminology I barely understood. But one number leaped out at me, printed in bold: 99. 9% probability of paternity. It's a match. Sarah confirmed. Noah is Jason Preston's biological son. Even though I'd known, had suspected from the moment Maria mentioned Jason's name. Hearing it confirmed felt like a punch to the gut. My husband had fathered a child with another woman. My husband had abandoned that child to cover up attempted murder. So it's true, I whispered. Amy was pregnant. She had his baby. According to medical records I pulled, Amy gave birth at Kalispell Regional Medical Center on September 2 ND. A healthy baby boy. 7 pounds 2 ounce. She listed no father on the birth certificate. Checked herself out after 24 hours against medical advice, and then Sarah's jaw tightened. 24 hours later, she drove off Highway 93 and died. September 2 ND. One day after Noah was born. The timeline made horrible sense now. You think she gave Noah to Jason and then killed herself? I asked, my voice hollow. I think Amy Parker was a young woman with no family, no support system, working part-time at a dental office, making barely above minimum wage. I think she found out she was pregnant by a married man who was already paying her $2,000 a month to keep quiet about their affair. Sarah pulled out another document. Bank statements with highlighted lines. Jason had been wiring her money since January. Every month like clockwork. $2,000. I did the math quickly. 8 months. $16,000. Money I'd never known about, siphoned from our joint account. But then she got pregnant. Sarah continued, and $2,000 a month wasn't going to cut it anymore. Maybe she asked Jason for more. Maybe she threatened to tell your father and Jason panicked. So he took the baby and then I couldn't finish the sentence. We may never know if Amy's death was truly an accident or if Jason had a hand in it. The crash scene was clean. No evidence of foul play. No signs of another vehicle. It's possible she was suffering from postpartum depression and genuinely lost control of the car. Sarah's expression was carefully neutral. Or it's possible Jason made it look like an accident. But without more evidence we can't prove it either way. I looked down at Noah still sleeping peacefully. This tiny person had lost his mother within days of being born and his father had dumped him with a stranger. There's more. Sarah said, pulling out yet another stack of papers. I subpoenaed Jason's financial records as part of the investigation. Hannah, your husband is drowning in debt. She spread the documents across her desk. Credit card statements. Loan papers. Investment prospectuses with red foreclosure notice stamps. Jason owes $150,000. He got involved in some bad real estate deals 2 years ago. Bought properties in Whitefish that were supposed to flip for a profit. But the market tanked. The bank's been threatening foreclosure. Collection agencies have been calling. He's been hiding it from you, paying minimum payments with cash advances from other cards. $150,000. I felt sick. And then there's your father. Sarah said quietly. Thomas Grant has assets totaling $800,000. His house, which is paid off and worth about $400,000. $200,000 in retirement savings. And a $200,000 life insurance policy that names you as the sole beneficiary. She let that sink in. According to Montana law, if Thomas died and you inherited Jason as your spouse, would have legal claim to half of those marital assets in the event of a divorce or all of it if you stayed married and pulled the inheritance. That's $400,000. More than enough to cover his debts and then some. The room tilted. So he tried to kill my father for money. That's the motive. Yes. Desperate man drowning in debt. Just lost $16,000 supporting a mistress. Now has a newborn son to worry about and he sees a way out. Kill his father-in-law. Make it look like an accident or a robbery gone wrong and wait for the inheritance to roll in. But you found him. I said slowly. My father survived. So the plan failed. Which is why Jason ran. Sarah closed the folders. He knew once your father woke up. Once we started digging into his finances. It would all come out. A thought struck me. What about Jason's lawyer? Can he argue that this is all circumstantial? Sarah's mouth twisted. Oh. He already is. Martin Cole. Jason retained him the day after your father was found. Cole is one of the most expensive defense attorneys in Montana, which tells me Jason planned for this possibility. Cole's argument is that debt doesn't equal murder. That Jason's relationship with Amy was consensual. And that we have no direct evidence placing Jason at the scene of the attack on your father. But I saw him. I protested. You saw someone throw something in a lake at night from 200 yards away. Cole will tear that apart. Sarah's expression was sympathetic but firm. We need more. Hannah. We need Jason to make a mistake. Or we need someone who was there to talk. I looked back at Noah. He stirred slightly. His little fist curling and uncurling. This baby was evidence. This baby was proof of Jason's lies. His desperation. His willingness to destroy lives to save himself. I want to keep him. I said suddenly. Noah. I want to apply for temporary custody. Sarah blinked. Hannah. You don't have to. He has no one else. Amy's dead. Jason's a fugitive. And my voice cracked. I was there when Maria brought him to my door. I fed him his first bottle in my house. I've been the only mother he's known for a week. I wiped my eyes angrily. This child is innocent. He doesn't deserve to be shuffled into the foster system because his father is a monster. Sarah studied me for a long moment. Then nodded. I'll talk to Child Protective Services. Given the circumstances, I think they'll approve temporary kinship care. But Hannah, if Jason is caught, when he's caught, this baby will be evidence in a criminal trial. You need to be prepared for that. I know. I reached down and gently stroked Noah's soft hair. But he's also a person. And he deserves someone to fight for him. As I carried Noah back to the car, the weight of everything pressing down on me, I made another silent promise: I would protect this child. I would find the truth about his mother's death. And I would make sure Jason answered for every single life he destroyed. Detective Sarah's call came on the morning of October 3 Road. Just as I was feeding Noah his breakfast bottle. Hannah, you need to sit down for this. Her voice was tight. Jason turned himself in. I nearly dropped the phone. What? He walked into the sheriff's office an hour ago with his attorney, Martin Cole. They're processing him now. And there's a bail hearing scheduled for this afternoon at 2:00. You should be there. My hands went numb. After 2 weeks of silence, of wondering where he was hiding, Jason had simply appeared, like he'd never been gone at all. I arrived at the Lake County Courthouse just before 2:00, leaving Noah with a social worker who'd been helping me navigate the foster care paperwork. The courthouse was an old brick building downtown, its interior all polished wood and echoing hallways. I'd been here once before years ago for jury duty. It had felt so official then. So safe. Now it felt like a trap. Detective Sarah met me outside the courtroom. The prosecutor is Karen Phillips. She's good. Experienced. She's going to argue for no bail. But she trailed off. Her jaw tight. Just be prepared. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with rows of wooden benches and a raised judge's bench at the front. And there, at the defense table, sat Jason. He looked different. Thinner. Maybe. His face drawn and stubbled. He wore a dress shirt and slacks, clearly provided by his lawyer, and his hands were cuffed in front of him. When I walked in, his eyes found mine across the room. He didn't smile. Didn't frown. Just looked at me like I was a stranger. I forced myself to sit in the gallery behind the prosecution table, my hands clenched in my lap. All rise, the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Henry Morrison presiding. The judge was a lean man in his 60s, with iron grey hair and a no-nonsense expression. He settled into his seat and reviewed the papers in front of him. We're here for a bail hearing in the matter of State of Montana versus Jason Preston. Counsel. State your appearances. A woman in a navy suit stood. Karen Phillips, Deputy County Attorney for the prosecution. Your Honor. Martin Cole rose smoothly, his expensive charcoal suit impeccable. Martin Cole for the defense. Your Honor. Proceed. Ms. Phillips. Karen Phillips didn't waste time. Your Honor. The state requests that bail be denied. Mr. Preston is charged with attempted first-degree murder and aggravated assault. After the alleged attack on Thomas Grant on September 15 th. Mr. Preston fled. He was gone for over 2 weeks, during which time law enforcement conducted an extensive manhunt. The defendant has demonstrated he is a flight risk and a danger to the community. He should not be released. Judge Morrison turned to Martin Cole. Mr. Cole. Cole stood, projecting calm confidence. Your Honor. My client did not flee. He was frightened. Understandably so, given that he was being accused of a heinous crime he did not commit. Mr. Preston retained my services, and upon my advice, voluntarily surrendered to authorities this morning. That is not the action of a guilty man trying to escape justice. He paused, letting that sink in. Furthermore, the evidence against my client is entirely circumstantial. The prosecution's case rests on the eyewitness testimony of Mrs. Hannah Preston, who claims she saw someone throw an object into Flathead Lake from approximately 200 m away at 3 o'clock in the morning in near total darkness. She was, by her own admission, in a state of panic. No photographs, no video evidence exists. Karen Phillips started to object, but Cole held up a hand. Moreover, forensic analysis of the crime scene, Mr. Grant's home, revealed no fingerprints, no footprints, and no DNA belonging to my client. The actual physical evidence points to someone else being involved, and the alleged victim, Mr. Grant, cannot identify his attacker due to retrograde amnesia. Judge Morrison frowned. What about motive? Mr. Cole, the prosecution will argue financial motive, that my client was in debt and wanted to inherit his father-in-law's assets. But debt is not murder. Your Honor, many Americans carry debt. That doesn't make them criminals. My client has no prior criminal record, has been a licensed real estate manager in Montana for 8 years, has strong community ties, and has a wife, and he paused delicately, a child here. He is not a flight risk. Karen Phillips shot to her feet. Your Honor, the defendant abandoned a newborn infant with a stranger before disappearing for 2 weeks. That does not suggest strong family ties. That infant's paternity has not been legally established. Cole countered smoothly. But regardless, my client is prepared to abide by any conditions this court deems appropriate. Electronic monitoring, travel restrictions, regular check-ins, whatever the court requires. Judge Morrison leaned back, his expression unreadable. The courtroom was silent except for the scratch of the court reporter's fingers on her machine. Finally, he spoke. Mr. Preston, stand. Jason stood, his cuffed hands resting on the table. The court finds that while the charges are serious, the evidence presented is largely circumstantial. The defendant's voluntary surrender weighs in his favor. However, the court also recognizes the severity of the allegations and the defendant's 2-week absence. Judge Morrison's voice was stern. Bail is set at $250,000. The defendant will surrender his passport, submit to electronic monitoring via ankle bracelet, and is prohibited from leaving the state of Montana. Additionally, the defendant is ordered to have no contact with Hannah Preston or Thomas Grant. Violation of any of these terms will result in immediate revocation of bail. The gavel struck. I felt like I'd been slapped. $250,000. It sounded like a lot, but I knew how bail worked. He'd only need 10% to a bail bondsman. $25,000. He could come up with that. He could walk free. And he did. Within an hour, Martin Cole had posted bond. I watched from the courthouse steps as Jason emerged, the ankle monitor visible beneath his pant leg. He paused at the top of the steps, and his eyes found mine again. This time he smiled. Cold. Triumphant. I turned away, my stomach churning, and found Detective Sarah. He's out. He's actually out. I know. Her voice was rough with frustration. But he's not free. Hannah. That ankle monitor tracks his every move. And we're going to keep digging. He'll make a mistake. They always do. Before I left the courthouse, I filed for a restraining order. Judge Morrison signed it within the hour. Jason was prohibited from coming within 500 feet of me, my home, or the hospital where my father was recovering. But as I drove home alone, I couldn't shake the image of Jason's smile. He'd tried to kill my father, abandoned his own child, and now he was walking the streets of Montana, confident that his expensive lawyer would keep him out of prison. I'd promised myself I'd make him answer for what he'd done. But the system had just set him free. 9 days after Jason walked out of that courthouse, I was still jumping at every sound. I'd installed extra locks on every door and window. I'd put up blackout curtains so no one could see inside at night. I kept my phone charged and within reach at all times. Detective Sarah's number on speed dial. And I'd hired a babysitter, a college student named Jenna, to stay with Noah in the evenings when I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. On the night of October 12th, that feeling proved right. It was just past 9:00. Jenna was in the nursery putting Noah down for the night, and I was in the kitchen cleaning up dinner dishes, trying to convince myself I was safe in my own home. The restraining order was ironclad. Jason's ankle monitor would alert authorities if he came within 500 feet. He wouldn't dare. The pounding on the front door made me drop the plate I was holding. It shattered on the tile floor. "Hannah." Jason's voice slurred and loud. "Hannah. Open the goddamn door. I need to talk to you." My blood turned to ice. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. "This is 911. What's your emergency?" "My husband. My ex-husband. He's violating a restraining order. He's at my door right now banging on it. I need help." What's the address?" I rattled it off. My voice barely steady. "Outside." Jason was still yelling. "Don't believe them. Hannah. The cops are framing me. They're lying to you. Just let me in and I'll explain everything. Officers are en route," the dispatcher said calmly. "They'll be there in 8 to 10 minutes. Stay on the line with me. Lock yourself in a room if you can." 8 to 10 minutes. That felt like an eternity. "Hannah. I know you're in there." Jason's voice turned harder. Angrier. "Don't make me." The sound of shattering glass cut through the air. The side window, the small one next to the front door, exploded inward. I heard the scrape of the lock being turned from the inside. He was coming in. He's breaking in. I told the dispatcher, my voice rising in panic. He just smashed a window. Stay on the line. Help is coming. But help wasn't here yet. I heard the front door crash open. Heard Jason's heavy footsteps in the foyer crunching over broken glass. I ran. Not toward the nursery. I couldn't lead him to Noah. But toward the stairs. Toward the second floor where I could lock myself in the bathroom. Where there was a window I could climb out of if I had to. "Hannah." His voice echoed through the house. "Get back here." I took the stairs 2 at a time. My heart hammering so hard I thought it would burst. But Jason was faster. I heard him thundering up behind me. And when I reached the top of the staircase, all 13 steps, he was right there. "Don't run from me." He grabbed my arm, spinning me around. His breath reeked of whiskey. His eyes bloodshot and wild. "I'm trying to help you. They're setting me up. Your father. The cops. All of them. They want you to believe I'm a monster. But I'm not. Let go of me." I yanked my arm free, backing toward the railing. "You tried to kill my father. You threw him in a lake." I didn't. His voice cracked. Desperate or furious. I couldn't tell which. "You saw someone in the dark. Hannah. You were scared. You were confused. It wasn't me. You have to believe me. I saw you." I screamed back. "I saw your truck. I saw you throw that sack into the water. You're wrong." He took a step closer. His fists clenched. "It was dark. You were 200 yards away. You don't know what you saw. And now you're working with them, turning my own son against me. He's not your son to claim anymore. You abandoned him." Jason's face twisted with rage. "He's my blood. And you're trying to take everything from me. The money. The kid. My freedom. You did this to yourself." My back hit the railing. Nowhere left to go. You're drowning in debt. You had an affair. You tried to kill my father for his money. And now you're going to blame me. For a split second, something shifted in his expression. The desperation fell away, replaced by something cold and calculating. You should have kept your mouth shut, he said quietly. And then he shoved me. It wasn't a push in anger, a heat-of-the-moment loss of control. It was deliberate, hard, both hands on my shoulders, all his weight behind it. I felt myself lift off my feet, felt the empty air behind me, and then I was falling. I hit the stairs halfway down. My shoulder cracked against the edge of a step, pain exploding through my arm. I tried to grab the railing, but my hand slipped. I tumbled, my head slamming into the wall, my ribs hitting another step, and then another, until I landed in a heap at the bottom of the staircase. Everything went dark. When I came to, I was moving. Bright lights overhead, the wail of a siren. Someone was pressing something soft against my head, gauze soaked through with blood. Awake. She's coming around. A paramedic's face swam into view. Can you hear me? You've had a fall. We're taking you to the hospital. Jason. I whispered the words scraping out of my throat. Blood filled my mouth. I must have bitten my tongue. He pushed me. Your neighbor called 911. Police are at your house now. They've got him. Relief flooded through me so intense I almost passed out again. Noah. The baby. The babysitter's safe. She locked herself in the nursery with the baby when she heard the commotion. They're both fine. I closed my eyes. Tears streaming down my face. My head throbbed. My shoulder screamed. But Noah was safe. Jenna was safe. And Jason. Jason had finally made the mistake Detective Sarah said he would. The paramedic said gently. You're going to be okay. Just stay with me. As the ambulance raced toward the hospital, one thought cut through the pain. He'd tried to kill me. In my own home. In front of a camera I'd installed weeks ago. Jason had tried to kill me. This time he wouldn't walk free. I woke in a hospital bed for the second time in a month. My head pounding and my shoulder screaming with every breath. The fluorescent lights overhead were too bright. The antiseptic smell too sharp. A nurse, young, efficient, was checking my vitals when I blinked my eyes open. Welcome back, Mrs. Preston, she said with a gentle smile. You gave us quite a scare. How's your pain level? 1 to 10? 7. I rasped. My throat dry. Maybe 8. She adjusted my 4, adding something that made the edges of the pain blur. You have a mild concussion and 5 stitches above your left eyebrow. No internal injuries. No broken bones. You were very lucky. Lucky. I'd been pushed down a flight of stairs by my own husband. And I was lucky. Noah. I managed. The baby. Your friend brought him by earlier. He's with a social worker. Perfectly safe. She patted my hand. You have a visitor if you're up for it. Detective Mitchell. I nodded. And a moment later Detective Sarah walked in. She looked tired. Dark circles under her eyes. Her usually neat ponytail slightly disheveled. But there was something fierce and satisfied in her expression. Hannah. She pulled a chair up beside my bed. How are you feeling? Like I fell down 13 stairs. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Well, the good news is Jason's in custody. He's not getting out this time. Violation of a restraining order. Breaking and entering. Aggravated assault with intent to cause serious bodily harm. And we have it all on video. Relief washed over me so powerfully I nearly cried. The camera. Your home security system captured everything. The entire altercation on the staircase. Him pushing you both hands. Deliberate force. There's no way any lawyer, not even Martin Cole, can argue that was an accident. Sarah leaned forward. But Hannah, there's more. And you need to hear this. I tensed. What? After we arrested Jason, we got a warrant to search your house. Standard procedure in a domestic violence case. We were looking for weapons. Evidence of premeditation. And in Jason's home office, in the bottom drawer of his desk, we found something. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photograph of a document. A will. Allegedly signed by your father. I squinted at the screen. It looked official. Legal letterhead. Formal language. And at the bottom, my father's signature. Thomas Grant. In his distinctive slanted handwriting. But something about it felt wrong. This will is dated September 10th of this year. Sarah continued. 5 days before your father was attacked. And according to this document, Thomas Grant left his entire estate, all $800,000, to Jason Preston. Quote, for his devoted care and support. My blood ran cold. That's a lie. My father would never, we know. We had it analyzed by a forensic document examiner. Her name is Rebecca Morgan. 45 years old. 20 years of experience with the FBI. And now a private consultant. She's one of the best in the field. Sarah swiped to another image. A blown-up comparison of 2 signatures side by side. This, Sarah said, pointing to the left signature, is your father's real signature from his driver's license and bank records. And this, she pointed to the right, is the signature on the forged will. To the untrained eye, they look identical. But Rebecca found discrepancies. She zoomed in further. The angle of the capital G in Grant is off by 3 degrees. The pen pressure is inconsistent. Your father had a steady hand from years of carpentry work. But the forger applied too much pressure at the beginning of each stroke and not enough at the end. And there's a slight tremor in the loops of the T and H that suggests someone was copying rather than writing naturally. I stared at the signatures. My stomach churning. Jason forged my father's signature. Not just that. Sarah swiped to yet another photo. When we arrested Jason at your house, we found these in his jacket pocket. 5 sheets of lined notebook paper covered in practice signatures. Thomas Grant. Thomas Grant. Thomas Grant over and over. Each one slightly different. Each one getting closer to the real thing. He'd been practicing. I whispered. For weeks probably. Maybe months. He was meticulous about it. Sarah's voice was hard. Jason didn't just try to kill your father on impulse. Hannah. This was planned. He forged a will. Practiced the signature until he could almost pass it off as real. And then he arranged for your father to disappear. If Thomas had died. If you hadn't followed Jason to that lake. He would have produced this will and claimed the entire estate. I felt sick. Not just angry. Not just betrayed. But physically ill at the level of calculation. Of cold-blooded premeditation. What about the real will? I asked. That's the nail in the coffin. Sarah pulled up one more document. Your father's actual will is on file with his attorney Robert Hayes. I spoke with him this morning. He's 50 years old. Been practicing estate law for 25 years. And he confirmed that Thomas Grant's will was executed on May 15, 2022 and has never been amended. The terms are clear. 90% of his assets go to you. 10% to charity. Jason isn't mentioned at all. So, Jason knew he wouldn't inherit anything through the real will. I said slowly. So, he made a fake one. Exactly. And once your father was dead, who would question it? You were grieving. The will looked legitimate. And Jason probably figured no one would bother with a handwriting analysis unless someone raised a red flag. Sarah's jaw tightened. But he got sloppy. He kept the forged will in his desk instead of destroying it after the plan failed. And he kept the practice sheets in his pocket. Probably because he was paranoid about someone finding them at home. Turns out that paranoia was justified. I closed my eyes processing it all. Jason hadn't just been desperate. He'd been scheming. Patient. Methodical. He'd forged a legal document. Rehearsed my father's signature. And plotted murder all for $800,000. What happens now? I asked. Jason's being charged with forgery, fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder in addition to the assault charges from last night. The forged will is evidence of premeditation, which strengthens the attempted murder case against him for what he did to your father. Between the video of him pushing you, the forged will, the financial records showing his debt, and the circumstantial evidence from the lake, Sarah's expression was grim but satisfied. Jason's looking at decades in prison. Maybe life if the DA can make first-degree attempted murder stick. Good. I said. And I meant it. He deserves it. Sarah stood squeezing my hand gently. Get some rest. Hannah. You've been through hell. But you're safe now. Jason's not walking out of jail this time. As she left, I lay back against the pillows, my head throbbing, but my heart lighter than it had been in weeks. Jason had tried to take everything from me. My father. My safety. My future. But his own greed had finally destroyed him. 3 days after leaving the hospital, my stitches still tender and my ribs aching with every breath, I couldn't sit still anymore. Noah was safe with a social worker. Jason was in jail. My father was recovering slowly in the hospital, his memory still frustratingly blank. But I needed answers. I needed to understand how deep Jason's betrayal went. How long he'd been planning this nightmare. Detective Sarah agreed to meet me at my father's house. The crime scene tape was gone now, but the place still felt haunted. Overturned furniture. Fingerprint dust on every surface. The faint smell of old blood. What are we looking for? Sarah asked as we stepped inside. I don't know. I admitted. But my father called me that night for a reason. He said it was urgent that he needed to tell me something about Jason. He must have found something. Some evidence. Maybe he left it here. We moved through the house methodically. Sarah checked the obvious places. Drawers. Closets. Under the mattress. I focused on the things only I would know to check. My father was a man of habits. He had favorite hiding spots. Places he thought were clever. But I discovered as a kid. The back of the hallway closet. The loose floorboard in the kitchen. The bookshelf. My father's bookshelf was his pride and joy. Built by his own hands 30 years ago. Lined with novels and carpentry manuals. And a few philosophy books he'd read over and over. I ran my fingers along the spines. Remembering how he'd quote Dostoevsky while teaching me to use a hammer. His favorite was Crime and Punishment. He'd read it at least 5 times. Always said it was about guilt and redemption. About how secrets eat you alive. I pulled the book off the shelf. It felt heavier than it should. Sarah. I called. My voice shaking. She was at my side in an instant. I opened the book carefully. And there, nestled in a hollowed-out section carved into the pages, was a small black USB drive. Oh my God. Sarah breathed. We took it to the kitchen table and Sarah pulled out her laptop. Her hands were steady as she plugged in the drive. But mine were trembling. A single video file appeared on the screen. Timestamped September 14th, 2023. 5:30 p.m. The day before my father was attacked. Sarah double-clicked the file and my father's face filled the screen. He looked exhausted. His eyes were bloodshot. His face drawn. And he kept glancing toward the window as though expecting someone to burst in at any moment. He was sitting in this very kitchen. the late afternoon sunlight slanting through the window behind him. "Hannah. Sweetheart," he began, and hearing his voice strong, coherent, alive, made tears spring to my eyes. "If you're watching this, then something terrible has happened to me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He took a shaky breath. 2 weeks ago, I started noticing changes in Jason. He was stressed, angry, secretive. At first, I thought it was just work, but then I overheard a phone call. He was arguing with someone about money. A lot of money. He said he needed more time, that he'd get it soon. It didn't sit right with me. My father rubbed his face, looking older than I'd ever seen him. So, I hired a private investigator. I know. I should have just talked to you. But I wanted to be sure before I said anything. And what he found. His voice cracked. "Hannah. Jason is in debt. Serious debt. $150,000 from bad real estate investments. The bank's threatening foreclosure. Collection agencies are calling him daily. I already knew this from Detective Sarah's investigation. But hearing my father say it, hearing the pain in his voice made it real in a way the police reports hadn't. And there's more." My father continued. "Jason's been having an affair with a woman named Amy Parker. She works part-time at a dental office in Whitefish. She gave birth to a baby boy in early September. Jason's son." The investigator confirmed it. His hands clenched into fists on the table. "I confronted Jason yesterday. I told him I knew everything. The debt. The affair. The baby. I told him he needed to tell you the truth. That I wouldn't let him keep lying to my daughter. And Hannah." His voice dropped to a whisper. He didn't deny it. He just looked at me with these cold eyes and said, "You should mind your own business." Old man. A chill ran down my spine. "I'm scared. Sweetheart. I'm meeting with Robert Hayes tomorrow morning to change my will. I was going to leave everything to you and a charity. But now I'm making damn sure Jason doesn't get a cent. And then I'm coming to see you. And I'm going to tell you everything. If Jason tries to stop me." He stopped mid-sentence, his head jerking toward the window. "Wait. I heard something. Someone's outside." The camera angle shifted as my father stood, the chair scraping loudly. His voice was low, urgent. "I'm hiding this drive in the Dostoevsky. Hannah. You'll know where to look. If something happens to me, please be careful. Jason's more dangerous than you think. He knows I found out. And I'm afraid he's going to." A loud bang echoed through the video. And my father's face went pale. "Someone's out there." The video cut to black. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would break through my ribs. Sarah reached over and paused the video, though there was nothing left to see. "He was going to tell you the next day," Sarah said quietly. He'd made an appointment with Robert Hayes for 9:00 a.m. on September 15th to change his will. But Jason and his accomplice acted the night of the 14th earlier than your father expected. He must have heard them breaking in, hid the USB in the book, and then went outside to investigate. That's when they attacked him. He tried to protect me," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "He knew Jason was dangerous. He to warn me." Sarah's expression was fierce. "This video is critical evidence, Hannah. It establishes motive, premeditation, and timeline. Your father knew Jason was desperate for money, knew about the affair and the debt, and was about to cut Jason out of his life completely. This proves first-degree attempted murder, planned, calculated, and executed to silence a witness." I couldn't speak. I could only stare at the frozen image of my father on the screen. His worried eyes, his trembling hands, his determination to protect me even as danger closed in around him. Thank you, Dad. I whispered to the empty room. Thank you for trying. Sarah closed the laptop gently. We've got him now. Hannah. Between this video, the forged will, the camera footage of him pushing you, and the financial records, Jason doesn't have a chance. He's going to prison for a very long time. As we left my father's house, I clutched the USB drive in my hand like a lifeline. My father might not remember the attack, but he'd left me everything I needed to bring his attacker to justice. Jason had tried to erase him, but my father had made sure the truth would survive. Before I reveal the identity of the man who attacked my father and the heartbreaking twist that connects him to me, I need your support. Comment 1 or 10 below if you're ready for what's coming. A quick note. The following story blends fiction with educational themes. If you'd rather not continue, feel free to exit now and find content that suits you better. By the end of October, Detective Sarah had pieced together the final missing piece of the puzzle. The forensic team had been analyzing evidence from my father's house for weeks. Fingerprints, shoe impressions, trace DNA. And finally, they got a hit. The fingerprints and boot prints that didn't belong to Jason matched a man named Ryan Brooks, 32 years old with a record of petty theft and illegal gambling in Montana. Sarah called me into her office the morning they arrested him. We found your father's attacker, or rather one of them, Jason's accomplice. My stomach dropped. Who? Ryan Brooks. Does that name mean anything to you? I shook my head. I've never heard of him. We picked him up this morning at an underground gambling operation in Missoula. He tried to run, but we had him cornered. Sarah pulled out a photograph, a mugshot of a man with dark hair, tired eyes, and a face that looked vaguely familiar in a way I couldn't place. We're bringing him in for questioning. I thought you might want to observe. An hour later, I sat in the observation room watching through the two-way mirror as Ryan Brooks was led into the interrogation room in handcuffs. He looked scared, his leg bouncing nervously under the table. Sarah entered the room and sat across from him. Mr. Brooks. I'm Detective Mitchell. You're here because your fingerprints and shoe prints were found at the scene of an attempted murder. Thomas Grant's home. On the night of September 14th. Ryan's face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Really? Sarah slid a folder across the table. Because we also have a wire transfer of $5,000 from Jason Preston to your bank account on September 13th, the day before the attack, and encrypted text messages between you and Jason discussing a job and payment upon completion. Ryan's hands clenched into fists. I want a lawyer. You're entitled to one. But before you call, you should know that Jason Preston is currently in custody facing multiple charges, including attempted murder, forgery, and assault. He's looking at life in prison, and he's already started talking. Sarah leaned forward. The question is, do you want to go down with him? Or do you want to tell me your side of the story? Ryan's resolve cracked. His shoulders sagged, and he put his head in his hands. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know who the guy was. Start from the beginning. Ryan took a shaky breath. Jason approached me in August. I was at a bar in Kalispell, and he just sat down next to me. Started talking. He said he needed help with something, that he'd pay well. I was in deep with some loan sharks. Owed 15 grand from bad bets. I was desperate. What did Jason tell you? He said there was a guy who'd screwed him over in a real estate deal. Stole $200,000 from him. And was hiding out in Montana. Jason wanted to teach him a lesson. Make sure the guy couldn't come after him legally. He offered me $15,000. 5 up front. 10 after the job was done. My blood ran cold. I didn't ask questions. Ryan continued, his voice breaking. I should have. But I didn't. Jason gave me an address, a taser, a metal baton, a burlap sack rope. He said to make it look like a robbery gone wrong. I thought I was just roughing up some white-collar criminal. You know. Not. He stopped, swallowing hard. Tell me what happened on September 14th. I went to the address Jason gave me. It was night. Late. I broke in through the back door. The old man Ryan's voice cracked. He came out to check what the noise was. I hit him with the taser. He went down. I beat him. Not bad enough to kill. Just enough to knock him out. Then I put him in the sack. And Jason showed up with his truck. We drove to Flathead Lake and threw the sack in. And Jason paid you. Yeah. 5,000 more. I took the money and left. I didn't think about it again until I saw the news that the guy survived. Ryan looked up. His eyes red. I swear I didn't know who he was. Jason never told me his name. Just gave me an address. Sarah pulled out another photograph. My father's driver's license photo. Do you recognize this man? Ryan looked at the picture. And I watched his face go from confusion to horror to something that looked like utter devastation. Oh my God. Oh my God. That's Thomas Grant. You know him? He's my father. Ryan's voice was barely a whisper. The room went silent. Sarah's expression didn't change. But I felt my world tilt on its axis. Father. Thomas Grant is your father. Sarah repeated. Yes. I mean biologically. I haven't seen him in years. We're not close. My mom. Maria Brooks. She and Thomas divorced when I was 4. I took her last name. Thomas remarried. Had another family. I only met him a handful of times growing up. Ryan's hands were shaking. I didn't know where he lived. I didn't know Jason was connected to him. I didn't know. Sarah leaned back studying him. Thomas Grant has a daughter. Hannah Preston. Maiden name Grant. Ryan's eyes widened. Hannah. I have a sister. Half-sister. Same father. Different mothers. Ryan put his head in his hands and started to cry. I almost killed my own father. Oh God. Oh God. What have I done? Sarah left him in the interrogation room and came to find me. My face must have said everything because she just nodded. You heard. He's my brother. I whispered. I have a brother. And Jason lied to him. Ryan thought he was attacking a criminal. Not his own father. Jason deliberately kept him in the dark. Sarah's voice was firm. Ryan's guilty of assault. Of being an accomplice. But he's also a victim of Jason's manipulation. An hour later. They brought me to the interrogation room. Not inside. But to the window where Ryan could see me through the glass. Sarah had explained the situation to him. When he looked up and saw me, his face crumpled. I'm sorry. He mouthed through the glass, tears streaming down his face. I'm so sorry. I couldn't speak. I just stood there staring at this stranger who shared my blood, who'd been used as a weapon against our father. Sarah returned to the interrogation room. Mr. Brooks. If you cooperate fully, testify against Jason Preston, provide all communications and evidence. The DA is willing to reduce your charges from attempted murder to aggravated assault and accessory. You're looking at 10 to 15 years instead of life. Ryan nodded, wiping his eyes. I'll do it. Whatever you need. I'll tell you everything. As I left the station, I felt numb. I'd gained a brother and lost him in the same breath. Jason hadn't just tried to destroy my father. He'd weaponized my own family against us. But at least now we had the final piece. Jason was finished. November had arrived with a cold Montana wind that stripped the cottonwood trees bare and frosted the windows of the Lake County Sheriff's Office. I sat across from Detective Sarah Mitchell in her cramped office surrounded by file boxes stacked 3 high against the cinder block walls. 2 months had passed since Ryan Brooks's confession. 2 months of waiting, worrying, and watching Sarah piece together the puzzle that would finally bring Jason to justice. "Are you ready for this?" Sarah asked, sliding a thick binder across her desk. The cover read, "State of Montana vs. Jason Michael Preston. Evidence Summary. This is everything we have. Everything that will put him away for the rest of his life." I opened the binder with trembling fingers. The first page was a still frame from my home security camera. Jason's face twisted with rage. His hand extended mid-shove as I tumbled backward down the staircase. The timestamp read 21:13:47. October 12th, 2023. Seeing it again made my chest tighten. But Sarah's voice cut through the memory. "That video is our strongest piece of direct evidence," she said. "It shows intent, premeditation, and violence. Martin Cole can't explain that away with reasonable doubt. Your husband deliberately assaulted you in violation of a restraining order. That's aggravated assault. Minimum 5 years in Montana. But the assault was just the beginning." Sarah turned to the next section. Ryan Brooks' sworn testimony. Over 3 recorded interviews. Ryan had laid out the entire conspiracy in meticulous detail. Jason had approached him in early September at a dive bar in Missoula, claiming he needed someone to teach a lesson to a rival real estate developer who cheated him out of a deal. Ryan, drowning in gambling debts to the tune of $32,000, saw it as a lifeline. Jason wired him $5,000 on September 13th as a deposit with $10,000 more promised upon completion. Jason provided everything. The address on Woodland Drive. A high-voltage taser purchased online. A collapsible metal baton. A canvas burlap sack. 50 feet of nylon rope. And explicit instructions to make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Ryan had followed those instructions to the letter on the night of September 14th. What he didn't know, what Jason had carefully concealed, was that the target was Thomas Grant, Ryan's own biological father. Ryan's testimony corroborates everything, Sarah explained. The wire transfers, the encrypted messages, the timeline. And because he's pleading guilty to aggravated assault and conspiracy, the jury will see him as a cooperating witness, not a co-conspirator trying to save his own skin. The third piece of evidence was the USB drive my father had hidden in his copy of Crime and Punishment. On that small black device was a 17-minute video recorded at 5:30 p.m. on September 14th, less than 4 hours before Ryan attacked him. In the video, my father sat at his kitchen table, his face drawn with worry, and explained everything he'd learned from a private investigator. Jason's affair with Amy Parker, the $150,000 debt from a failed Whitefish condo development, the monthly $2,000 payments to Amy and the baby born in early September. My father had planned to meet with his estate attorney, Robert Hayes, the next morning to revise his will and remove Jason entirely. He never got the chance. The video ended abruptly with the sound of footsteps outside and my father's whispered words. "There's someone out there. That USB establishes motive," Sarah said. Jason knew your father was about to cut him off. $800,000 in assets gone. That's when he accelerated the plan. The fourth piece was the forged will discovered during the search of Jason's home office. Linda Foster, the forensic handwriting expert, had testified that the signature attributed to Thomas Grant on a document dated September 10th was a sophisticated forgery. Jason had practiced my father's signature on at least 5 sheets of paper found in his jacket pocket at the time of his arrest. The forged will left the entire estate to Jason, citing years of loyal care and support. It was a lie meticulously crafted to steal my inheritance. Then there was Noah. DNA testing confirmed with 99.9% certainty that Noah was Jason's biological son. Amy Parker's death on September 3 Road, just 2 days after giving birth, had left the newborn in Jason's hands, a financial and emotional burden he couldn't afford. Rather than claim paternity openly, he'd hired Maria, an undocumented immigrant, to care for the child in secret, paying her $500 a week in cash. When Jason went on the run, Maria had panicked and brought Noah to me. The DNA evidence tied Jason to Amy, to Noah, and to a motive rooted in desperation and greed. Sarah pulled out another folder. Financial records subpoenaed from Jason's bank and credit card accounts. The paper trail was damning. On September 10th, 3 days before the attack, Jason had used his Visa card to purchase a Viper Tech VTS 989 stun gun from an online retailer, along with a 20 inches collapsible steel baton and a 50-foot coil of industrial rope, all shipped to a UPS store mailbox in Kalispell under a fake name. The receipts matched the items Ryan had used on my father. The same account showed the $5,000 wire transfer to Ryan 13th, and a second transfer of $10,000 on September 16th, hours after my father was pulled from Flathead Lake. That's conspiracy to commit murder, Sarah said, premeditated, calculated, and cold-blooded. She closed the binder and looked me in the eye. Hannah, this is a slam dunk case. We have 5 felony counts. Attempted murder in the first degree, aggravated assault, forgery, conspiracy to commit murder, and child abandonment. Karen Phillips is pushing for the maximum. 43 years minimum, possibly life without parole. Martin Cole had tried to negotiate a plea deal in early December. He'd offered a guilty plea to second-degree assault in exchange for dropping the attempted murder and conspiracy charges. Karen Phillips had refused in a terse 3-sentence email. The defendant is a danger to society. The people will proceed to trial and seek the maximum sentence. No deal. The trial was scheduled for mid-October 2024. Nearly a year away. Sarah warned me that I'd be called to testify about the night at Flathead Lake. About Jason's abuse. About the staircase. I nodded. My hands clenched in my lap. I was ready. For my father. For Noah. For myself. Let's finish this, I said. October 2024 brought the weight of 13 months' grief. Fear. Evidence to the Lake County Courthouse. I walked through the heavy doors on a Monday morning, hands trembling in my navy blazer. Noah was with a sitter. My father waited in the witness room down the hall. Memories still fragmented, but determination whole. This was the culmination of everything since that September night at Flathead Lake, when I'd watched my husband try to drown my father. The courtroom was oak-paneled and solemn, tall windows letting in pale autumn light. 12 jurors sat along the right wall. 7 women and 5 men, ages from a young nurse in her 30s to a silver-haired rancher near 65. They watched as I took my seat at the prosecution table beside Karen Phillips. Across the aisle, Jason sat next to Martin Cole in a charcoal suit and pale blue tie. Face blank. He hadn't looked at me since his arrest. Judge Henry Morrison entered in his black robe. And we stood. The state of Montana versus Jason Michael Preston, he announced. Counsel. Proceed with opening statements. Karen Phillips rose, smoothing her black jacket. At 48, with 20 years prosecuting violent crime, she exuded quiet authority. She approached the jury without notes. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll hear evidence of a calculated, cold-blooded crime. Jason Preston spent weeks plotting to murder his father-in-law, Thomas Grant, to steal an $800,000 inheritance. When Mr. Grant survived, The defendant forged a will to steal it anyway. When his wife discovered the truth, he tried to kill her by throwing her down a staircase. Karen gestured toward the evidence table, holding a laptop, burlap sack, and bank records in plastic bags. You'll see video of the defendant assaulting Mrs. Preston in her home. You'll hear from Ryan Brooks, the man Jason paid $15,000 to attack Mr. Grant. You'll see the forged will, financial records, and DNA evidence proving Jason fathered and then abandoned an infant after the mother's suspicious death 2 days postpartum. This is not reasonable doubt. This is overwhelming proof of guilt. Martin Cole stood, buttoning his tailored gray jacket. At 55, he was Montana's premier defense attorney with an 80% acquittal rate. He smiled gently at the jury, tone warm and conversational. My client is not a criminal mastermind. Ryan Brooks, a convicted felon with violent history and $30,000 in gambling debts, attacked Thomas Grant. Ryan wielded the taser and baton. Ryan stuffed an elderly man into a sack and threw him in Flathead Lake. Why? Because Ryan owed loan sharks money and saw a chance to extort Jason Preston, a real estate manager with 0 prior criminal record. Martin paced slowly. Yes. Jason owed Ryan money from a failed business deal. Yes. There were financial pressures. But debt doesn't make you a murderer. You'll see a video of my client pushing his wife during a heated, alcohol-fueled domestic argument. That's assault. Yes. But not premeditated attempted murder. It was a man losing control in a drunken moment. Not calculated violence. Ryan Brooks is the villain here. Jason Preston is flawed. But he's not a killer. Judge Morrison nodded. The state may call its first witness. The state calls Hannah Preston. My legs felt weak walking to the stand. I placed my hand on the worn Bible and swore to tell the truth. Karen approached with an encouraging look. Mrs. Preston, describe what you witnessed September 15th, 2023. I steadied my voice. My father called around 8:30 p.m. Terrified. Told me not to tell Jason. When I reached his house, the door was open. Lights off. Signs of struggle everywhere. At 3:00 a.m., I woke and realized Jason had left. I followed him to Flathead Lake. I watched him drag a large, heavy sack to the water's edge and shove it in. How far away were you? About 200 yards. I parked on the access road, walked through trees so he wouldn't see me. But I saw him clearly in the moonlight. His face, posture, truck. It was Jason. I know my husband. Karen moved on. Tell the jury about Noah. I explained Maria appearing at my door 3 days later with a crying newborn. How Jason had paid her $500 weekly to care for the baby secretly. How DNA confirmed Noah was Jason's son with Amy Parker, who died in a suspicious car accident just 2 days after childbirth. Then Karen set up the laptop facing the jury. This is security footage from your home October 12th 9:13 p.m. Can you identify it? The video played. Me backing away in the upstairs hall. Jason at the staircase, top face twisted with rage. Audio captured our voices. My desperate plea. His vicious accusation. Then his hand shot forward and I tumbled backward down 13 steps. I couldn't watch. I stared at my lap, tears streaming. When it ended, the courtroom was silent. 2 female jurors wiped their eyes. Martin Cole approached for cross-examination, expression gentle. Mrs. Preston, you were 200 yards away in complete darkness at 3:00 a.m. Isn't it possible you were mistaken about who you saw? No, I said firmly. It was Jason. But you didn't see his face clearly from that distance. Correct. I saw enough. His build. Walk. Truck. I know my husband. And on October 12th. Had your husband been drinking alcohol? He had. I hadn't. So, your husband was intoxicated when this incident occurred? Yes. But that doesn't mean he didn't know exactly what he was doing. Martin nodded and sat. Judge Morrison glanced at the clock. We'll recess 1 week to allow the defense to prepare additional witnesses. Court adjourned until Monday, October 21st. As the jury filed out, several turned back to the frozen laptop image. Jason's outstretched hand. My body in mid-fall. Justice was coming. 1 week later, I returned to the Lake County Courthouse with my stomach in knots. The courtroom felt colder. The oak benches harder. The weight of everything heavier. My father sat in the gallery behind me, his hand resting gently on my shoulder as Judge Morrison called the court to order. The jury filed in, their faces unreadable. And I held my breath. The state calls Ryan Brooks. Karen Phillips announced. Ryan walked to the stand in an Orange County jail jumpsuit. Wrists cuffed. Eyes red-rimmed. He'd lost weight in the 2 months since his arrest. His face gaunt and pale. After taking the oath, he sat and met my gaze for the first time since that terrible night in the interrogation room when Sarah had shown him the photograph of our father. Karen approached gently. Mr. Brooks, please tell the jury how Jason Preston contacted you. Ryan's voice cracked. Early September. He found me at a bar in Missoula. Said he had a job. Needed someone to rough up a rival real estate guy who'd cheated him. I was drowning in gambling debts. $32,000 to loan sharks who'd threatened to break my legs. Jason offered $15,000. 5 up front. 10 after. I was desperate. So I said yes. What did Jason provide? Everything. The address. A high-voltage taser he'd bought online. A collapsible baton rope. A burlap sack. He told me to make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Hurt the guy bad enough he wouldn't recover. He didn't tell me the target was Thomas Grant. He didn't tell me it was my own father. Ryan's voice broke completely and tears streamed down his face. If I'd known. I swear to God. I never would have done it. When Detective Mitchell showed me that photo and I realized what I'd done, he looked directly at me. Hannah, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for what I did to you. To our father. I can't take it back. But I'm telling the truth now because it's the only thing I can do. Jason Preston hired me to kill our dad. Martin Cole stood for cross-examination. His tone sharp. Mr. Brooks. You're cooperating with the state because you've been offered a plea deal. Correct. Reduced charges in exchange for your testimony. Yes. Ryan admitted. But I'm also cooperating because it's the right thing to do. I deserve to go to prison for what I did. But Jason deserves worse. He lied to me. Used me. And tried to murder his own family. Martin pressed. You have a criminal record. Theft. Assault. Illegal gambling. Why should this jury believe anything you say? Ryan met his gaze steadily. Because I have nothing left to lose. I'm going to prison for 10 to 15 years. The only thing I have left is the truth. Detective Sarah Mitchell took the stand next. She walked the jury through the forensic evidence. The wire transfers from Jason to Ryan. The encrypted text messages. The receipts for the taser and baton purchased on September 10th. The DNA evidence confirming Noah's paternity. The handwriting analysis proving the forged will. Each piece built on the last. A mountain of proof that buried any doubt. Dr. Michael Ross followed his testimony. Clinical and devastating. Mr. Grant was submerged in 48 degrees water for approximately 15 to 20 minutes. Hypothermia. Drowning. and blunt force trauma to the skull created a life-threatening emergency. If the rescue had been delayed even 5 more minutes, he would have died. This was not an accident. This was a deliberate attempt to kill. Robert Hayes, the estate attorney, confirmed the original will dated May 2022 and testified that the signature on the September 2023 document was a sophisticated forgery inconsistent with Mr. Grant's genuine signatures in every measurable respect. Then came closing arguments. Karen Phillips stood before the jury, her voice ringing with conviction. "Ladies and gentlemen, Jason Preston is a cold-blooded killer who spent weeks planning the murder of his father-in-law to steal $800,000. When that plan failed, he forged a will. When his wife discovered the truth, he tried to kill her. 2. He has shown no remorse, no humanity, no conscience. The state asks for the maximum sentence on every count." Martin Cole rose, his tone measured and somber. "My client made terrible mistakes. He was drowning in debt, desperate, and he trusted the wrong person. But the evidence of premeditated murder is circumstantial at best. Ryan Brooks is a convicted criminal with every reason to lie. We ask the jury to consider the possibility of reasonable doubt, and if convicted, to recommend leniency." The jury deliberated for 8 hours. I sat in the hallway outside the courtroom. My father beside me, Sarah across from us, all of us silent and exhausted. When the bailiff finally called us back inside, my heart hammered so hard I thought I might faint. The jury foreperson, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, stood as Judge Morrison asked, "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor, on the charge of attempted murder in the first degree against Thomas Grant. How do you find?" "Guilty. On the charge of aggravated assault against Hannah Preston, Ninte Salvatines." "Guilty. On the charge of forgery." "Guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder." "Guilty. On the charge of child abandonment." "Guilty." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Jason's face went white. I covered my mouth with both hands, tears spilling over. Judge Morrison banged his gavel. "Order. Mr. Preston, please rise for sentencing." Jason stood, his lawyer beside him. "Jason Michael Preston," Judge Morrison said, his voice like iron. "You have been found guilty of 5 felonies. For attempted murder in the first degree, I sentence you to 30 years in the Montana State Prison. For aggravated assault, 12 years. For forgery, 5 years. For conspiracy to commit murder, 8 years. For child abandonment, 2 years. These sentences will run consecutively for a total of 57 years. You will not be eligible for parole for 40 years. Bailiff, remand the defendant into custody." Jason turned and looked at me, his face twisted with hatred. For a moment, I thought he might lunge across the courtroom, but the bailiffs were already moving, cuffing his wrists, and pulling him toward the side door. He didn't look away until the door slammed shut. I collapsed into Sarah's arms, sobbing. My father stood and wrapped his arms around both of us. And for the first time in 13 months, I felt the crushing weight lift from my chest. "It's over," Sarah whispered. "It's finally over." I looked up at the empty judge's bench, the empty witness stand, the jury filing out. Justice had taken 13 months, but it had come. For my father. For Noah. For me. March 2025 arrived with the first wildflowers blooming across the hills above Flathead Lake, and a warmth in the Montana air that felt like a promise. 18 months had passed since that terrible September night when my father had been dragged from his home, beaten, and left to drown. 18 months since the attack that had stolen his memory and nearly stolen his life. He lived with me now in the guest room downstairs, The room that had once been my childhood art studio. The doctors had told us the retrograde amnesia might never fully resolve. That the memories of the hours and days before the trauma could be lost forever. My father had accepted this with quiet grace. Rebuilding his life one day at a time. He walked without a cane now. His physical scars faded to thin white lines along his temple and forearm. He played with Noah in the backyard. Helped me with groceries. And sat on the porch in the evenings watching the sun set over the lake. It was a Thursday afternoon. Unseasonably warm for early March. And I was sitting on the living room floor with Noah. At 18 months old. He was a sturdy little explorer. Toddling from the coffee table to the couch and back again. Giggling each time he made the journey without falling. His dark hair. So much like Jason's that it sometimes made my chest ache. Was getting long enough to curl at the ends. I was stacking blocks for him to knock down when my father walked in from the kitchen. A cup of tea in his hand. He stood in the doorway for a long moment watching us. Then he set the cup on the side table and sat down slowly in the armchair. His expression distant. "Sweetheart," he said quietly. "I remember." I looked up. My hand frozen mid-reach for a blue block. "What?" "I remember," he repeated. His voice steady but heavy. "September 14th. The night it happened. I remember everything." My heart stopped. I scooped Noah up and set him in his playpen with a handful of toys. Then crossed the room and knelt in front of my father. Taking his hands. "Tell me." He took a breath. His eyes focused somewhere far away. It was early evening. I just finished recording that video on the USB drive. The one you found in the book. I was sitting at the kitchen table and I heard a noise outside in the backyard. Footsteps. Maybe. Or something scraping against the fence. I knew someone was there. His jaw tightened. I didn't have time to call the police. I grabbed the USB and ran to my bookshelf. I shoved it into Crime and Punishment. The book was thick enough and I knew you'd find it if something happened to me. Then I went to the back door to check. I squeezed his hands. My throat tight. When I opened the door, a man was standing there. Tall. Maybe in his 30s. Wearing a dark jacket and gloves. I didn't recognize him. I started to shout to tell him to get off my property. But before I could, he raised something. A taser. And hit me with it. I went down hard. My whole body locked up and I couldn't move. Couldn't scream. His voice grew quieter. He hit me. A metal baton. I think. He hit me in the head. In the ribs. Over and over. I tried to fight back. But I couldn't. I was dazed. Bleeding. But I was still conscious. And that's when I heard it. Heard what? I whispered. Jason's voice. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped his hands harder. He was standing by his truck. Maybe 20 feet away. I could see him in the glow of the porch light. He wasn't helping me. He wasn't stopping the man. He was just watching. And then he said it. My father's voice broke slightly. Finish him. Don't let him keep breathing. I've paid you enough. Tears spilled down my cheeks. Dad. I heard him. Hannah. Clear as day. He wanted me dead. My own son-in-law. The man I'd welcomed into my home. The man I'd trusted with my daughter. He stood there cold as stone and ordered that man to kill me. I was sobbing now. My forehead pressed against his knees. He stroked my hair gently. The man Ryan I know now dragged me across the yard. I couldn't fight anymore. He shoved me into a burlap sack. Tied it shut. I felt myself being lifted. Thrown into the back of a truck. Then we were moving. I could hear water. Smell the lake. And then I was falling. Sinking. Cold water everywhere. I tried to breathe. But I couldn't. And then nothing. I passed out. The next thing I remember is waking up in the hospital 3 days later. And you were sitting beside me. holding my hand. I looked up at him. My face soaked with tears. "I'm so glad you're alive. I was so scared I'd lose you." He cupped my face in his hands, his own eyes wet. "I'm still here, sweetheart. And I'm not going anywhere. That man is locked away for the rest of his life. We're safe now." I nodded, unable to speak. He glanced over at Noah, who was contentedly chewing on a plastic dinosaur in his playpen. "And now I have a grandson. I know he's not your son by birth, Hannah, but he's ours now. We'll raise him together. We'll give him the life his father tried to destroy." I stood and wrapped my arms around him, and we held each other for a long time. Outside the window, the late afternoon sun was sinking toward the mountains, painting the living room walls in shades of amber and gold. Noah babbled happily from his playpen, oblivious to the weight of the past and the miracle of the present. For the first time in 18 months, my father's mind was whole. The missing pieces had finally come home. And so, slowly, carefully, our small family began to heal. June 2025 brought warm sunshine and the scent of pine through the open windows of the Flathead County Family Court. I sat at the petitioner's table in a pale blue dress, my hands folded tightly in my lap to keep them from shaking. 21 months had passed since Maria had left Noah on my doorstep. 21 months of sleepless nights, doctor's visits, first words, first steps, and a love so fierce it had reshaped my entire understanding of motherhood. Today, that love would become official. Noah was in the waiting room with my father, probably playing with the toy trucks we'd brought to keep him occupied. At 22 months old, he was a bundle of energy, his dark curls bouncing as he toddled everywhere, his vocabulary expanding daily with new words like juice, ball, and his favorite, mama. That word still made my heart ache in the best possible way. Judge Margaret Foster entered the courtroom, and I stood along with everyone else. She was 55 with silver-streaked brown hair pulled into a neat bun and a kind face that softened the formality of her black robe. She settled into her seat at the bench and opened the file in front of her. "We are here today," she began, her voice clear and measured, "for the matter of the petition by Hannah Elizabeth Preston to adopt Noah, a minor child currently in her kinship care. Ms. Preston, please rise." I stood, my legs unsteady. Judge Foster reviewed the documents, her reading glasses perched on her nose. "According to the home study report prepared by Ms. Jess Morgan of Montana Child and Family Services, you have been caring for Noah since September 18th, 2023, a period of 21 months. During that time, you have provided for all of his medical, educational, and emotional needs. The report indicates Noah is thriving both physically and psychologically in your home." She looked up at me. "Is that accurate?" "Yes, Your Honor," I said, my voice stronger than I'd expected. "Ms. Preston, please tell the court why you wish to adopt Noah." I took a breath, gathering my thoughts. "Your Honor, Noah is an innocent child who became a victim of crimes committed by his biological father, Jason Preston. Noah didn't choose the circumstances of his birth. He didn't ask to be abandoned or to lose his mother just days after he was born. But he deserves a loving, stable home. He deserves to grow up knowing he is wanted, protected, and cherished. I've cared for Noah since he was 2 weeks old. I've rocked him to sleep, sung him lullabies, kissed his scraped knees, and celebrated every milestone. He calls me Mama, and I love him as if I gave birth to him myself. I'm asking this court to make that bond legal and permanent. I will raise Noah as my own son. I will give him every opportunity, every ounce of love I have. And when he's old enough to understand, I'll tell him his story, but gently, with compassion, so he knows he was always loved. Judge Foster nodded slowly, making notes. Thank you. Ms. Preston. Mr. Thomas Grant. You are listed as a supporting party in this petition. Please approach the bench. My father stood from the gallery and walked to the witness stand. Steady and dignified, the bailiff swore him in. Mr. Grant. Judge Foster said, you are Ms. Preston's father and have been residing with her and Noah for several months. Do you support this adoption? I do. Your Honor, my father said firmly. Noah has no blood relation to our family. His biological father is my former son-in-law, Jason Preston, who is currently serving 57 years in state prison for attempted murder, assault, forgery, and conspiracy. Noah's biological mother, Amy Parker, died shortly after his birth. Noah is an innocent child who needs love and stability. My daughter and I have welcomed him into our home and our hearts. We will raise him as our own. Hannah as his mother and me as his grandfather. He deserves a family. Your Honor. And we are his family. Judge Foster smiled slightly. Thank you. Mr. Grant. She turned to Jess Morgan, the social worker. A woman in her 40s with short auburn hair and a clipboard full of notes. Ms. Morgan. You conducted the home study. What are your findings? Jess stood and spoke confidently. Your Honor. I visited the Preston home on 4 separate occasions over the past 6 months. I observed Noah interacting with Ms. Preston and Mr. Grant. He is a happy, healthy child. He calls Ms. Preston Mama and Mr. Grant Grandpa. He has his own bedroom filled with age-appropriate toys and books. Ms. Preston has enrolled him in a toddler playgroup and takes him to regular pediatric checkups. There are no safety concerns. No signs of neglect or instability. In my professional opinion, this is an ideal placement for Noah. He is thriving. Thank you. Ms. Morgan. Judge Foster called the next witnesses. Detective Sarah Mitchell testified that she'd known me throughout the criminal investigation and trial, describing me as resilient, compassionate, and deeply committed to Noah's welfare. Nurse Linda Patterson, who had cared for Noah in the hospital when he first arrived, spoke about how I'd held him for hours that first night, refusing to leave his side even when the nurses offered to take over. After the last witness, Judge Foster removed her glasses and looked directly at me. Miss Preston, adoption is a lifelong commitment. You understand that if this petition is granted, you will have full parental rights and responsibilities for Noah. He will legally be your son in every sense of the word. I understand. Your Honor. I said, and I'm ready. She nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. I have reviewed the evidence, the home study, and the witness testimony. It is clear to this court that you have provided Noah with a safe, loving, and stable home. It is in the best interest of the child that this adoption be granted. She picked up her gavel. The petition is approved. Noah is hereby legally adopted as the son of Hannah Elizabeth Preston. A new birth certificate will be issued reflecting this change. Congratulations, Miss Preston. You are officially a mother. The gavel came down with a decisive crack and I burst into tears. My father came forward and wrapped his arms around me. A moment later, the bailiff brought Noah into the courtroom and he toddled straight to me, arms outstretched. Mama, he squealed. I scooped him up, holding him close, his little hands patting my wet cheeks. You're mine now, I whispered into his curls. You're really, truly mine. Outside on the courthouse steps, Sarah took a photo of the 3 of us. Me holding Noah, my father standing beside us, all of us squinting into the bright June sunshine. Noah clutched his toy truck in one chubby fist and grinned at the camera. oblivious to the magnitude of what had just happened. He was home. He was safe. He was loved. And he was finally legally mine. September 2025 arrived with golden leaves drifting across Flathead Lake and crispness in the Montana air. 2 years had passed since that terrible night when I'd watched my husband try to drown my father. 2 years since my world shattered and slowly rebuilt itself into something stronger than the perfect facade I'd once clung to. I stood on the back deck of my new house. A modest cabin tucked into the pines a quarter-mile from the lake's shore. I'd sold the old house in Kalispell 18 months ago. Too many ghosts. This place was ours. Mine. My father's. And Noah's. Wide windows let in morning light. A stone fireplace warmed us. And a backyard where Noah could play without fear. Inside, I heard my father's laugh mixing with Noah's giggles. At 62, my father had recovered remarkably. The emotional scars would never fully fade. But he'd found peace in daily rhythms. Reading the newspaper, tending his garden, and most of all, doting on his grandson. Noah was 2 years old now. A sturdy, dark-haired toddler with an infectious laugh and endless questions. He attended preschool 3 mornings weekly, learning colors, letters, and how to share. My father picked him up daily and they'd come home chattering about finger painting or the frog they'd seen. Watching them together. Grandfather and grandson bound by love, not blood, filled a hollow place in my chest. 3 afternoons weekly, I volunteered at the Flathead Women's Resource Center, providing shelter, counseling, and legal assistance to domestic violence survivors. I'd started 6 months after the trial, drawn by a need to turn pain into purpose. At first, I sorted donations and answered phones. Slowly, as I healed, I began sharing my story in group sessions. How I'd been trapped in a marriage built on lies. How I'd nearly lost my father. How I'd found strength to fight back. Some women were freshly escaped, bruised and terrified. Others had been free for years, but carried the weight. I understood both. In helping them, I continued healing myself. It was a Thursday afternoon warm for late September. Noah played in the living room with his dump truck, making engine noises. I folded laundry on the couch when he suddenly stopped and looked up. "Mommy," he said, voice tentative, "why don't I have a daddy like Emma and Lucas?" My hands froze. I'd prepared for this question, but hearing it still made my heart clench. I crossed the room, kneeling so we were eye to eye. "Come here, sweetheart." I pulled him into my lap. He settled against me, fingers playing with my shirt. I took a breath. "Noah, your daddy had to go away because he did very bad things. Things that hurt people. So, he can't be here. But that doesn't mean you're missing anything. Baby. Mommy and Grandpa love you so. So much. We love you enough for 10 daddies. You have everything you need. You have a family that loves you more than anything." Noah tilted his head. "Daddy was bad." "Yes, honey. But you're not. You're the best thing that ever happened to me." He wrapped small arms around my neck. "I love you and Grandpa most in the whole world. Mommy." Tears pricked my eyes. "We love you most, too. Noah. Always." My father appeared in the doorway, leaning with a soft smile. "You're our pride and joy, buddy." Noah ran to him and my father scooped him up, tossing him gently until he shrieked with laughter. Later that evening, after Noah was asleep and my father had retired, I walked onto the deck and stood at the railing looking over Flathead Lake. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange, pink, and violet water reflecting the colors. Somewhere out there, 2 years ago, I'd stood in darkness and watched my husband commit an unspeakable act. I'd been terrified, shattered, lost. But I wasn't that woman anymore. 2 years. I never thought I'd survive the pain. I never thought I'd stand here and feel anything but horror. Life had taught me a hard lesson. Trust the right people. Surround yourself with those who lift you up, not tear you down. Don't let greed and lies destroy what matters. Love. Family. Truth. Jason was in Montana State Prison serving 57 years. He wouldn't be eligible for parole until nearly 90. By then, Noah would be grown, living a life Jason would never touch. My father was healthy and whole, memory restored, heart full. And Noah was growing up surrounded by love, laughter, and safety. That was all that mattered. The screen door creaked and Noah padded out in dinosaur pajamas, clutching his stuffed bear. "Mommy, I can't sleep." I smiled and held out my hand. "Come here, baby." He took my hand and we stood at the railing looking over the lake as light faded. The water was calm, the air soft, and the world felt safe. "Look, Noah," I whispered, "isn't it beautiful?" "Pretty," he agreed, leaning against my leg. "Want to walk by the water?" He nodded eagerly. I scooped him up, carrying him down the steps to the path leading to the lake's shore. We walked slowly, his small hand in mine, feet crunching on gravel. The lake stretched out vast and peaceful, last sunlight dancing on the surface. This place, once the site of horror, was now our refuge, our home, our new beginning. As we stood together, mother and son, survivor and innocent, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. The past was behind us. The future was ours. And it was going to be beautiful. Looking back, I realize my story is a harsh reminder of how family betrayal can shatter even the strongest bonds. I married Jason believing in love, trust, and a future together. But greed turned him into a monster who orchestrated family revenge against the very people who welcomed him with open arms. My father nearly died. I nearly died. An innocent baby was abandoned. All because one man chose money over everything sacred. If I could speak to my younger self, I'd say, don't ignore the red flags. Don't make excuses for someone's cruelty just because you love them. Trust is earned, not given blindly. And when family betrayal strikes, don't stay silent. Speak up, fight back, and protect those you love before it's too late. I used to think family revenge was justified, that anger and hatred could somehow balance the scales. But I've learned that true justice comes not from vengeance, but from healing, truth, and the courage to rebuild. God gave me the strength to survive when I thought I had nothing left. Faith. My father's resilience and Noah's innocent love taught me that light can grow even in the darkest soil. My advice: never ignore warning signs in relationships. Family betrayal often hides behind familiar faces. And family revenge, no matter how tempting, only breeds more pain. Choose love. Choose honesty. Choose life. If this story touched your heart, please leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Have you ever faced betrayal or found hope after tragedy? I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to like, share this video, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss our next story. Thank you so much for staying with me until the very end. And a gentle reminder: the stories on this channel contain fictionalized elements created for educational purposes. If you prefer different content, feel free to explore other videos that suit your interests. Stay safe and God bless.